Few weeks ago, Daniel and I did an episode of The Daily Objective about comedian Dave Smith, who has become a very vocal critic, to say the least, of Israel. Mark Pellegrino took it a few steps further and actually talked to that uh, person a couple of days ago in a debate, a 2 hour debate. We are here to discuss that debate, and we are here with Mark Pellegrino himself to discuss his debate, and James Valiant as well. By the way, there's a Robin says in the chat. Wait, now Lucifer is defending Israel. It kind of that makes me think about the show we just did on the Daily Objective with Candace Owens. Don't tell her because she will do a show about that. Actually, tell her. Yeah, we need the views.
It's no accident. I mean, isn't it true? Every time Miss Owens would say, every time you find a defender of Israel, they're Lucifer. See, that just proves her point, right?
So, Mark, first of all, I want to say the fact that you managed to sit through 2 hours of this guy is an achievement in and of itself. Um, and yeah, I want to start
Can
with
I,
like,
can I just say it was very difficult, and when I did try to interrupt the filibusters, apparently his microphone was much more powerful than mine, and nobody could hear anything that I was saying.
yeah, that's
And
true.
then by the time he would get to the end of the filibuster, which was a shotgun blast of about 70 or 80 misrepresentations and bad facts, I could only address one or two things, and then he would try to decontextualize things that I said, and then hone in on those. So it was an exercise in sophistry, if you ask me.
So I have to say, and again, I say this as a viewer who would not participate in such a debate because I couldn't stay calm if I did. I thought that was a problem in that you let him get under your skin, under his yeah, like he got under my skin as well. But you let him kind of he threw 80 things at you. You don't have to respond to those 80 things. And I think you kind of let him he knew what he was doing. He was kind of that was probably a way to throw you off on his part.
Yeah, very possible. I mean, it's great to reverse engineer things like this. It's like rolling in the mat. You know, you realize that, oh, I could have taken this opportunity. I didn't have to go this route. I didn't have to, try to field every single false thing that he said. I just had to keep it focused onto one narrow plane and go from there. It wouldn't have hurt, however, if the moderator kept responses down to 1 minute, and so that he wouldn't have to filibuster. So there was a
Wait,
degree, as much
there
as
was a
I
moderator?
yeah, well, I know. As much as I like David Fight, and I don't, I would prefer not to criticize him because I like him. He did not take control of the event, and so it was one guy attempting to fight Marcus of Queensberry against another guy who didn't give a shit about any debate rules.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about the Biden-Trump debate, which will go down in history as the moment a president basically lost his presidency and had to quit the race. But I think of that debate in the sense of, the good thing about it was it was moderated. Like they had a very specific time to talk, and then their mic was cut off. Like what
Yes.
would have been great here is you have a minute and then I mute you. You have a minute and then I mute you. Like that would have been great, but again, that's easy for us to say. Um, James, your initial thoughts on the debate.
Well, my initial thought, well, at finding out that this was your first debate, Mark, I mean, I was a trial attorney for many years. I did it for a living. And finding out that this was your first debate was a surprise to me because I thought, on balance, you kicked his ass. Um, the I think our thumbnail is really brilliant on this. It's Raphael's famous picture School of Athens, and it has you in the Aristotle role, and it has Smith in the Plato role. Smith was arguing a bunch of floating abstractions from a theoretical libertarian perspective. He had messed up. He kept claiming all kinds of stuff about objectivism that just ain't objectivism. So
Okay.
he's straw manning objectivism left and right, but he's lost in the clouds of some floating abstraction like libertarians normally get. And you were there with facts about Hamas, facts about Israel, facts, and emotion. So even if he got under your skin, let me just say, as a professional debater, that the kind of guy who goes for facts and even emotion is going to win the debate. Because if someone was just looking at that debate, well, why is this Smith guy lost in this? Wait, because self-defense for babies, and he's going to keep coming back to you're contradicting yourself as an objectivist. Well, why should I care that he contradicts himself as an objectivist? If that's your approach, and that is the way many libertarians approach it, we can get into all the fallacies that Dave Smith had, and frankly, he was throwing shit out at such a rate. I mean, he was machine gunning bollocks at you so much that it was absolutely impossible to answer every single one. And that, I think, the so-called I've also had an opportunity to moderate debates in my career. I moderated a debate between Peter Schwartz and Michio Kaku some 40 years ago at NYU. That guy he's a no-show for a moderator. He just let the thing get out of control. And it would have been better if it had been better controlled. But on balance, I think you won. No question in my mind.
Well, thank you. But I also think, his libertarian anarchist droogs think because he talked a lot and talked over me, and some of my responses you couldn't even hear because his microphone was more powerful, makes him the winner. One of the most, one of his, I accused him of sophistry, and he was like, "Whoa, we've been having another online battle again." Yeah, that's not true. And well, it is true when you say that a state that doesn't respect rights can make no claim to rights, and that a state that does respect rights has the right to invade that state at any time that it wants to. It just the real question is whether it should or not. He turned that into you have a right if you claim to be a rights respecting state to murder babies in third world countries. So that was his response. His rather a guy who claims nuance. That was his sophistry at work in the debate, and it was indicative of almost everything that I said. If I say that a society is infected with a toxic ideology, he would turn that into me being a collectivist, as if I don't acknowledge that there are individuals within the Palestinian community who don't hold that ideology. I just don't think it's Israel's responsibility to parse those people out. It's their moral responsibility to defend their citizens, and then defense means ending Hamas, and it means ending the ideology, which he again said was impossible, which by all quote unquote intelligence organizations estimates, which I threw back at him. Well, the CIA also thought that Israel would not defeat the combined Arab armies in the late 40s. So they were wrong then. They were wrong now, and they have a long history of being wrong.
Yeah,
So
so the issue with that point for me is, yeah, when Israel says, when officials in Israel say we can't beat Hamas, that's true if Israel keeps fighting the way it's fighting. That's the
yes,
problem, and
yes.
that's the only way they think it's legitimate to fight. They're not going to beat Hamas. I mean, this war, unfortunately, is going to end up with Hamas winning whenever it ends. It might end up with more, Hamas terrorists dying, but Hamas will win. But yeah, this is not, this is kind of I don't know, James, correct me if I'm using frozen abstraction wrong here, but I think that the type of warfare that Israel is engaging in is seen as a frozen abstraction for warfare. This is not the only way to fight a war. This shouldn't be the way you fight a war. You should fight it to win at as little cost as possible to you, and in the most decisive way. And I think
That's important because Israel calls itself the most moral army in the world, and by altruist standards, they are, because they're sacrificing their men and women, their precious blood, their economic lives in order to defend Palestinian citizens as if they are the equals of the Israeli citizens. Now, you say things like that to a character like Dave Smith, and he starts playing rhetorical games with things like that because he doesn't understand actually what the concepts mean. I feel like you want to say something, Mr. Valiant.
Oh, I have so many things I want to say about Mr. Smith. But yeah, when he keeps coming back to immediate personal self-defense is it. And so for him, to respond in an organized way to organized violence, which is exactly why we need government. I mean, it's after the fact self-defense. It's real. Organized self-defense is real. And when it's organized self-defense, the moral status of the person I'm shooting at is irrelevant. Once I start getting shot at, it doesn't matter whether it's a 9-year-old child who'd been brainwashed. It doesn't matter if someone shoots at me and holds up their baby and I shoot back and the baby dies. It's the aggressor's fault. See, he doesn't have a conceptual understanding of self-defense at all. It's this micro, concrete bound on one side and then a floating abstraction on the other. And this is typical of libertarians and typical of anarchists. No, you have a right.
And ironically, and not so ironically, he was accusing us of having a micro and macro ethics, which contradicted each
Right.
other. When my opening statement bound together the same ethics for individual self-defense as a state self-defense.
Well, exactly. Something like Japan. If you'd said to me in 1940, can you change Japanese culture and society? These people are kamikaze in their devotion to the divine emperor. You ever going to change them? Yeah, we did change them. And it can be changed. Cultures can be changed. And sometimes, guess what? Really properly fighting the war, occupying them until however long it takes, works. And it worked in the case of Japan. You pointed that out. Factually, on the question of facts, he completely clobbered him. And he was lost in this. He couldn't even grasp the idea of organized self-defense and how that would work. And for him, if it's immoral to kill babies, it's just intrinsically immoral to kill babies. So I found it very interesting that he equates ethics with social ethics and politics. What are you kept asking him, and it was great. You asked him, what is your fundamental moral approach? And he said, he would list off, oh, well, self-ownership, the non-aggression principle. So it's just politics and social ethics. That's all. And then you would say egoism. Oh, yeah, I buy egoism too. And he just tossed it off like that. To him, moral foundations are irrelevant. Again, classic libertarianism. They do not think philosophically. And psychoepistemologically, it's total rationalism.
Yeah, I think the point with the babies was, I mean, he brought this up several times, but one of them was maybe one of his weakest moments in the debate. But I'll get to that in a second. I want to thank Michael Sanders for the super chat. Michael says, it makes me so pessimistic that 99% of the comments section is anti-Mark and anti-objectivism. What can we do? I actually think that's a good thing. That means we're reaching an audience that isn't on board with us. And look, people listened and then they commented based on their current views. And there are also people, if 99% are against of the people who are commenting, it's safe to assume many of the people watching are also not in agreement with Mark coming in, which means you are reaching a new audience. That's a good thing.
I would also say that I've seen some of the 99% of the comments. They are almost to a T stupid. And the 1% of the comments that are defending me are almost to a T extremely intelligent. So that should say something right there.
You were talking about getting under the skin, Razi. When you see all those negative comments, you can tell that Mark got under a bunch of people's skins. And, whenever I myself participate in like a social media interaction and someone has no substantial, I make an argument, a coherent argument, and they just attack me personally again and again and again, I know I've won. I know I've won. That's the sign that I won. I pop the champagne because I don't need to respond any further. They've admitted, in effect, that they lost the debate. And so if you have a bunch of mischaracterizations, straw man arguments, personal attacks, emotional effusions, which a lot of the comments basically amount to, that's really a concession that you got under their skin, Mark.
Yeah. So at some point he says, yeah, if somebody, is shooting at you and they have two babies next to them, you can shoot back. But if they run away into their home and they have babies there, you can't shoot at them anymore, which is basically saying, look, on October 7th, that's how I apply this to October 7th. On October 7th, it was okay for Israel to shoot at the shooters and any babies they may have brought with them to commit the terrorist attack. It would not, that's it. That's where Israel should stop. If Israel, shoots at any more Palestinians, it's the next time they do on October 7th. They cannot do anything to prevent it. They cannot do anything to acknowledge, okay, there is an enemy here that may have run back behind the fence, but it's still there. It's still planning. If it's planning, that's none of your business. Your business is when they start shooting, and that's it.
And I tried to deal with it by making a distinction between violence that happens within a civil society, where the police are obligated to protect the innocent people surrounding them, and a war which is the absence of civil society, and where your object is to get the enemy. And if the enemy decides to go back to his home and expose his family to death, that is their fault. It's not the defender's fault. So he confuses all the time. He uses the same examples all the time, irrespective of whether he gets them proven wrong. It's as if he never absorbs what the other person is saying. He never absorbs the truth of what the other person is saying. So he can't understand the idea that a civil society works differently than a society that's in the midst of a war.
Well,
And that was
exactly.
the point. That was a distinction I was trying to make, because what I see all over social media is this attempt, as Ankargate said, to sanitize war. Everybody's saying there should be these laws, these rules, these regulations, these things. Well, that's what civilization is, and that's precisely what you abandon when you decide to murder people.
And the
That's
whole
the
idea is
passionate now. Okay, I get passionate now about it. It's not
right.
just Dave being silly, and it's just something I feel passionately about.
One of the crazy, crazy things about a libertarian is that they're unable to do a compared to what analysis. In other words, if America owns, or if Israel owns, the government owns a bunch of real estate. I mean, take a look at America, Alaska, and Nevada, which are basically owned by the federal government. That's it. They're just as evil as Iran. And Israel is just as evil as Hamas. We can't make any kind of distinctions, because once you're an ANCAP like that, and once a government is done, all governments are evil, don't you see? And they're all equally evil, and we can't make a distinction. America is no different than Iran. Israel is no different than Hamas. And in his mind, there are no factual distinctions that are of any importance when you get that. And he also, of course, completely drops the factual context of organized violence. Organized violence. If someone organizes an attempt to get at me, obviously it's insufficient to deal with just the folks who invaded Israel on October 7th. There's a much wider problem here, and it's outside of the jurisdiction, as you pointed out so eloquently, of Israel. They have to treat the rules of the road are such that you, as a group, have indeed lost any recognition of the rights, regardless of the individual innocence or guilt of the people there. They've become instrumentalities of the enemy's war, you see.
That was their biggest sticking point, and the thing they think is a contradiction to objectivist ethics. They call us collectivists because we're holding an entire society responsible for something that Hamas did. Well, you don't get 300 miles of tunnels underneath an entire city, and you don't get networks of munitions in various places like mosques and hospitals and homes without the help of civilians. In fact, in those kibbutzes that were attacked, Palestinians that were aided by the people in those kibbutzes, those hippies who actually thought the Palestinians needed their help and actually tried to provide help, were spies that were able to inform Hamas where the centralized locations of the munitions were, where their arms were, so that when the Israelis tried to defend themselves, Hamas had already taken the spots up around those places and murdered the people that were trying to defend themselves. So yes, the citizens were involved. Yes, 1,000 or so poured over the border along with the militant creeps, and they kidnapped and murdered and raped as well, and they auctioned off some of those people to Hamas for money. I mean, it's a creepy society. There's just no question about it, and you can't deal with the creepy society by negotiating with it.
Isn't it astonishing how libertarians will defend the least liberal societies and cultures on earth? You obviously are looking at this in the Islamic world. You're looking at the most anti-freedom, anti-individual. Okay, so they're willing to go to bat for the worst kind of totalitarians. And this was true back in his intellectual guru, Murray Rothbard's day. Murray Rothbard thought the Viet Cong were the heroes in Vietnam. Okay,
Yeah.
now that's the kind of mentality you were up against. There's no way that this guy can think conceptually. What he calls collectivism is actually what I would call a conceptual level of analysis. You are anti-conceptual. You're dealing either with in the concrete bound world or with floating abstractions, which he quavered from back and forth, but mostly stuck to his floating abstractions.
Yeah, and in one of his many attempts to explain objectivism, he said, I wrote this down somewhere, something to the effect of explains why the way objectivists object to government is the same as the way Rothbardians object to government, which is, of course, not true in that objectivists do
Oh,
not object to government.
thank God
Uh,
I don't. Thank God I don't remember that.
well, yeah, that's the thing when, as you said, somebody throws 80 things at you, you know, there is the crow epistemology is a real thing. Thank you, Aviva, for the super chat. Daniel sent here in our Zoom chat a comment that somebody put on the debate, saying, putting as a quote, "War is the absence of civilization," and then saying Mark and probably Hitler, which is really that's very telling on how libertarians think, because to them, it doesn't matter that Hitler started a war. His whole thing was, fighting and killing. That was his whole purpose. Whereas you said very clearly, war is not something that you want. It's something that you're forced into. And when you're forced into, you try to end as quickly, as decisively as possible.
Yes.
So it's
Yes, one of the reasons that we have forever wars now is because, well, we've all pinned it as objectivist to just war theory, which is simply an altruist's way of looking at war. It's the opposite of rational egoism. The rational egoist looks at a threat to his life, and if the society run by rational egoism looks at a threat to their collective lives as something that needs to be ended as soon as possible. They understand that emergencies are situations under which people cannot live for long periods of time, and war is one of those situations. And right now, Israel, under the altruist ethic, is wasting its youth, it's wasting its economic value, it's destroying itself against an enemy that it could kill in 5 days. It's taken 8 months because they're trying to show the world, unfortunately, that they care for Palestinians. Well, no, you got to care for Israeli citizens. That Palestinian boat sailed a long time ago. And if Palestinians don't have the self-esteem to care for themselves enough to surrender, then so be it.
Yeah, by the way, it's been over 10 months. And I just want to quickly say, James, that at some point, he says in his Dave Smith's explanations of Ayn Rand's philosophy, he says Israel is like the criminals in every Ayn Rand book because
He
of
did.
taxation, conscription, government ownership of most of the land, which is, he's basically conflating the point that you did make, which is Israel is the freest country in the Middle East, with a point that nobody ever makes, which is Israel is the ideal state, and everything about it is great.
What's stupid about that is I said at the beginning, at the very beginning, that I wasn't there to defend Israel as a perfect state. I said that. And I also said over and over again, when we're talking about freedom, we're talking about relative to the environment around us. There's no state that is free in the way that an objectivist would like it to be free. But there are a few that have principles enshrined in their original documents that enable them to have a standard to work towards or reject. Now, we've been rejecting our principles for 150 years, so be it, but we have the principles. And Israel also enshrined principles of equality and pluralism in their Declaration of Independence. Is there an equivalent document that exists in either Gaza or the West Bank? Well, yes, there's the Hamas charters, which are genocidal. So
Well,
they
but
have their clear moral purpose. Israel has its clear moral purpose. America has its clear moral purpose. Their aspirational values, which are better?
right. And who's actually trying to implement the better system? Who's actually trying to implement justice and freedom and rights in an equal way? There isn't even an attempt in the Islamic world to do so today. And you made some great comparisons. For example, the American South, or take Hitler, for example. But a libertarian cannot admit that government ever did anything good. And so a libertarian cannot admit that it was good that the United States crushed slavery in the South, or that it was good that the Allies defeated Nazi Germany. You can't do that if you're a libertarian, because you're lost in this world of floating abstractions where all governments are evil. A great objectivist historian once said to me, Jim, in the world of history and politics, the three most important words are compared to what? Now, there was a world until about 150, 200 years ago, slavery was the uniform norm around the world. And to the degree that nations were stopping that and ending it, they were good. And from a libertarian perspective, no, 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 you can't take sides on the slavery versus anti-slavery side because they're both corrupt states. The Union was corrupt, the South is corrupt, so we throw up our hands and we say they're both evil states, and that is essentially his argument.
Even worse now, the libertarians are quoting John C. Calhoun in states' rights. I mean, they're quoting one of the biggest racists in the South to justify their states' rights position. So, I mean, it really boggles the mind how these people are able to get away with it.
Oh, yeah, the way they defend Native Americans against European colonialism, for example, dropping all the context of facts in any case. But the point is, the Native Americans were not about to come up with Lockean rights anytime soon or an industrial revolution. And yet, libertarians are
Yeah,
the
see,
ones who are out there defending savagery, whether it's Islamic or wherever else you find the savagery.
because they have this natural rights philosophy that they seem to think that natural rights come with your body. They come with you like you're an appendage. There and they exist for everyone. And I tried to make some distinctions there that seemed to go right over Dave's head, and he filibustered over me. But I tried to explain to him that no, rights are conditions, but those conditions have to be recognized, and they are recognized through a long chain of reasoning. They are adaptation. They are an adaptation to natural. I wouldn't say natural law, but certainly life itself and the natural needs of human life. I said, and I think I said to him at one point, Dave, are your clothes natural? Is your house natural? Or is the
That
hammer that
was,
you use to hammer a nail, is that natural? No, but they're adjustments to the needs of human life, and rights are the same. They're a man-made thing. They're an artifice, but they are a necessary artifice that reflects the requirements of human life.
well, I can understand someone quibbling over artifice, but in the context, and in fact, I got a report, an oral report, before I actually got to see the debate itself when it was downloaded last night here, and someone quibbled with me. He said, "Oh, Mark should never have said that rights are an artifice." But when I myself heard it last night, you made the context perfectly clear. This is a human discovery. This is a
Yes.
human discovery, and it has to be recognized. And unless it is recognized, it's hard to respect the rights of some gang collective who's claiming collective ownership of the property, claiming collective rights, racial rights. How do you even begin? You can't. There's no way to start even to get a foothold on the argument if they don't see that it's a human discovery. And so I think in context, it made perfect sense to me at least. Um, uh, but you're up against just one last thought. You're up against those that would say though that the Jeremy Bentham types. Rights are mythological, like ghost or something. They're nonsense on stilts, as Jeremy Bentham said. So using a word like artifice will trigger some objectivists out there. But within the context of what you said, it made sense to me. I knew what you were saying.
Okay, thanks. I'll try not to use that from now on, but it does seem it's less an invention than a discovery. So I should put it that way, because I consider it an invention just because of its deep conceptual
Well,
value. And
the essence of your point is that they have to be recognized. They have to be grasped. It's
yes,
it's like physics. Until you grasp physics, you can't take advantage of, Newton's laws of mechanics. Until you grasp the concept of rights properly, your society is going to be a rights violating one. And when that rights violating society becomes aggressive, guess what? That whole
well,
society gets to be
they they
taken
they
down.
are aggressive by the fact that they're rights violating from the very beginning. So that's another quibble that he had issues with, because he felt like I was he was like, so then do we have a right to go into third world countries? I said, some of these third world tin horn dictatorships, and I said, sure, yeah, we have a right, but should we? That's another question. And then he said, so we have a right to go in there and kill babies, and not what I said. Not
Um,
what I said,
so
and not a proper extrapolation from what I said.
No.
I want to get to another thing he said, but I want to first thank Garbled Words for the super chat. Garbled Words says, "Mark, you are awesome. I love seeing you getting around. I look forward to hearing your conversation with Peter Boghossian." Yeah, me too. I have a feeling that even if you disagree, it will be kind of a more civil disagreement than with somebody like Dave Smith. So at some point he says. Um,
Yeah,
you
just
talk about
before you get into that, I want to make a comment about Peter Boghossian. He's a decent human being. He actually wants to have a dialogue. He's open to learning, and not that I can teach a professor of philosophy anything about philosophy, but he certainly treats me as if I can, and that's the caliber of man that is something I aspire to be, and something that Dave Smith certainly is not.
Yeah, Peter Boghossian is impressive, although I do think there are many professors of philosophy, Mark, who you can teach a lot about philosophy, and the world would be a better place if that happened. So at some point he says, you say, Israel gave autonomy to
Yes.
Gaza, and he says even the pro-Israel side wouldn't say that Israel gave Gaza autonomy. And then he says it's cartoonish, which also got under your skin, understandably, because it is an insult. But it's also an insult following bullshit, because of course the pro-Israel side does say that Israel gave autonomy to Gaza because that is a fact, and he's so used to being on the side where facts is something you hide that he thinks maybe the other side does the same. But no, this is a factual statement, and he
Yeah.
openly with no problem lies about it and then
Well, no,
gives his
here's what
reason.
he said in an attempt to justify his position. Then he said, I shifted the goalposts. So I said they gave Gaza autonomy, and he said, what do you mean autonomy? They patrol their shores, they prevent food from coming in, they control their water and their electricity. And then I said, why? And he filibustered in some other way, but he didn't explain himself. I said, well, they do have political autonomy. He said, oh, now you're saying political autonomy, so you're moving the goalposts. And I said, Dave, the reason they patrol the shores is because Hamas brings in weapons. They have to inspect the food as it's coming in because Hamas likes to hide murderous weapons in there. And I don't see Hamas, a point I didn't make, spending the copious billions of dollars they get from international aid on any form of infrastructure whatsoever, except for terror tunnels. Are they building water desalination plants? Are they coming up with independent energy sources? They're not. They're not.
I mean, Israel, when Israel removed the Jewish population from Gaza by force because that was a step supposedly towards peace, they left all the infrastructure there. Infrastructure that was far better than anything anybody in the non-Jewish parts of Gaza had. And the Palestinians went and, of course, destroyed all of it because it's Jew stuff. It's not the,
Right.
you know,
That's the true apartheid state. Gaza is the true apartheid state. When you can't live with somebody that you consider ethnically, religiously inferior to you, they have to be off your land. And not only do they have to be off your land, but the advances that they bring to your land have to be destroyed simply because you've touched them. That is an extreme apartheid state. And so whenever I hear issues over the settlements, which just drives me insane, I ask myself, why do you have such a problem with Jews living in your midst? If
Right,
you're calling
right,
the Jews the apartheid state, and yet you can't live with a Jew living next to you.
right, right. It's totally a one-sided racial analysis. But within a couple of weeks of Hamas taking power in Gaza, they were lobbing rockets at Israel. So of course you're going to have blockades. And if the rockets ease up a little bit, okay, the blockades ease up a little bit, but then we get more rockets, so there's more blockade. So Gaza wouldn't have been blockaded had they not been launching missiles at Israel from the moment that Gaza got autonomy and elected practically the nanosecond that Hamas took power. They were lobbing rockets. Did they try to build some kind of society with some decent infrastructure or some peaceful society where people could get ahead? No. Their whole reason for existence, well, French call that raison d'etre. Their whole reason for being is to destroy Israel, and they're willing to make babies so that they become martyrs in the cause of killing all Jews. That
Yeah,
is
and
the
that's
true
not made
genocide.
up. That's not made
That is
up.
the true apartheid.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not made up. Women talk about it. It's documented. We have video evidence of not just one woman, but hundreds of women saying that they produce babies for the cause. And they proudly proclaim when they have 1, 2, 3, or 4 sons that have died as martyrs because it gives them social cred. What kind of toxic society gives social credibility to a murderer? A sick, sick fucking society.
Yeah. Thank you, Jonathan, for the super chat. Jonathan says Mark was outstanding. Well done. Thank you, Regina, for a super chat. Thank you, Regina, for another super chat. Regina says Mark was awesome. I agree. I actually want to go back to this point about, the insult, saying it's cartoonish, because that's something people do in debates and in arguments. They'll say this is cartoonish, this is childish, this is simplistic, a favorite one of many people, and it's a way of, and this is actually why I think I'm very proud of the thumbnail for today, because he is a very Platonistic thinker, Dave Smith. If you present something that is clear, that is obvious, it's clearly it's missing the complexities that we as adults should know are in everything, and there's so much of them that we can't actually make up our mind about anything except the Jewish state must go.
Right, right. You see, an anarchist must hate a decent state. A libertarian must be anti-American and anti-Israel and anti the innovation of British liberalism 300 years ago. The state, if it ever does anything good, right? As a prosecutor, I put away bad guys. And I know that I put away bad guys, murderers, rapists, child abusers, armed robbers, people like that. I didn't do anything good from the anarchist standpoint. I was an agent of evil because I was an agent of the state, even if I was properly convicting using evidence against bad guys. Now, when it comes to foreign aggressors, of course, you don't have the same, as Mark eloquently pointed out during the debate, that Israel doesn't have that kind of control. It's precisely because they gave autonomy to Gaza that they don't have that kind of control and have to deal with Hamas as an organization, have to deal with the Palestinians there as a group. That is not collectivism. That is thinking about things conceptually.
Yeah, amen.
So at some point, Dave Smith says something about, I always try to listen to the other side, and I try to hear the best arguments from the other side, because that's how I challenge myself, or something like that. And everything I've heard from the pro-Israel side is unconvincing. And I have to say, that is not how people should think about things. It's good to listen to what people have to say, but no, I don't think you should like, the way you educate yourself about this conflict is by watching Mark Pellegrino debate Dave Smith. It's by looking at the situation for yourself, and thinking about first of all, who are the sides in this conflict, and what do you think about what they are and what they are fighting for? And the Palestinians are clearly fighting for nothing but death, the death of the other side, whereas Israelis, it's a society of people who want to live, and it's people who have managed to live despite the odds being stacked against them. And yeah, I think this is it's telling that Dave Smith thinks the way you form an opinion about something is listening to a bunch of people, and then
Yeah, but he
seeing.
doesn't even do what he says. So it's not like he's even really listening to the other side. What he's done is he's read the new historians, that new historian school on Israel, and because they are more or less anti-Israel, cherry pick facts, don't actually go to source material, to the primary source material, but reverse engineer history to meet a hypothesis that they've formed. He thinks he's somehow superior and more sophisticated than everybody else. Dave has to realize that from Dennis Prager on, Dennis Prager's probably forgotten more about Israel than Dave Smith will ever know, and he's probably read more about Israel in its original language than Dave Smith could even approach. But I actually tweeted I said to Dave Smith, look, the new historians have been soundly disproven already. And Benny Morris himself, who flirted with that school for a while, has refuted the new historians already. On Twitter, I gave him the name of Ephraim Karsh, his books, who is, the fabricating of the history of Israel. He takes these guys apart, and it is a rational, systematic destruction of a school that should have no academic merit whatsoever, but it's almost entirely informing Dave's opinion. And he talks so goddamn much that he doesn't actually listen to anything that's coming in from the other side. He just concludes that if it's not from the new school, it must be it's the state propaganda. That's what he considers the classic Israeli history.
You did a great job of pointing out that he's been suckered into a bunch of crap revisionist history, and that was an outstanding point to make. I mean, it's one. If anyone saw today's Daily Objective, those historians are barely a half step up from Candace Owens' lunacy, frankly. But in Dave Smith's mind, if any government still engages in taxation, it can't do anything good. Since America has coercive taxation, since every nation on the world has coercive taxation, there can't be a better or worse side. There can't be an aggressor or a defender. There can't be a good guy or a bad guy because, gosh, America engages in coercive taxation. So any help, so any military aid, but by the way, we also sell a bunch of the military and we work in cooperation with Israel about it, by the way. But the mere fact that there's coercive taxation and that there's any sort of subsidization of Israel, even though they are the only civilized nation in the area, that's it. That's automatic. And therefore, he can't even distinguish between the barbaric monsters in Hamas or the barbaric monsters, by the way, in Iran, which is behind all this. He can't, in his own mind, make those distinctions.
James, I don't know why you can't see the difference between coercive taxation and hanging gay people from cranes, or dragging dissidents through the streets, or shooting them in front of citizens. Or withholding elections so that you can maintain power. I don't know why you can't make distinctions like that.
So there's okay. Let me get to another point. While
Because
James,
there aren't distinctions. They're all the same, man. It's all the same.
That's it.
Susie, yeah. Susie says in the chat, I hereby proclaim Mark an honorary Jew. Susie, I'm afraid you can't do that. We have to speak to the elders at the next meeting, but we'll bring it up. One thing that bothers me with the moderator and Mark, I know you like him, so but I still have to criticize him especially for this, because what the format of the debate, that's between the moderator and the people debating. At some point, when we did hear from him, he said, "Obviously, I'm in the middle on this issue, but the title of the debate was ceasefire or eradication." That title basically tells me, okay, there's this pro-Palestinian side who just wants the violence to end. He just wants, he wants a ceasefire. He wants no more dead babies. And there's this other side, the pro-Israel side, who wants eradication. He wants to eradicate the
Yeah,
poor victims of Israel.
I tried to deal with that title bias early on, by saying the actual title should be ceasefire or surrender, and I tried to make distinctions there, but I don't know if they came across. But I do agree with you. The title itself was biased as hell.
If Israel actually had any genocidal motives, there wouldn't be a Palestinian in the area right now. They wouldn't even need to use any nukes to do so. The idea is absurd, and it goes back to aid is delivered, and it's insane, and the aid is even being delivered, but the aid is delivered. Hamas grabs it. Hamas, if the Palestinians ever do get it, sell it at a premium, etc. If you can't see how organized force works, if you can't see Hamas as a governmental type organization, which he refuses conceptually to get to, then of course you're never going to be able to understand the differerences here. It does take a conceptual level of analysis to even start taking this apart. But he was psychoepistemologically, if I can use the term, unqualified for doing that. He cannot think conceptually. To
Well,
him, it's all of a concrete bound emotion or a floating abstraction that you're somehow contradicting.
Um, it
The facts on the ground are not, don't bother him with the facts on the ground, Mark. And when a person in a debate is treating facts like that, which he was, they've lost.
So in 2 days on this show, we have the topic is the pro-Palestinian mindset, and we have Lee Pearson on the show. So you can definitely use the term psychoepistemology to get us ready for that show. There's a comment in the chat that, oh yeah, a duel with one-sided ceasefire is called execution. Yeah, and that is essentially what's being called for. Remember, there have been multiple ceasefires throughout this conflict. Mark, you pointed out that in a sense the pro-Palestinian side is right, although not in the way they frame it. But when they say this didn't start on October 7th, no, it started with it started before the state of Israel was created, and it kept going and it kept going until the Palestinian people were created, basically as a justification
Look,
for.
look, the Arab community in the Palestinian Arab community has learned for decades upon decades upon decades that violence gets them what they want. The first Arab revolt in 36 to 39 resulted in the White Paper, which hobbled Jewish immigration, prevented them from really acquiring the numbers in Israel, in what is now Israel, that would enable them to have a state. It banned them from buying land, and the mandate didn't defend them against the violence, so they had to come up with other means of defending themselves. Violence got them what they wanted. Every ceasefire hasn't been met with concessions on the part of Arabs. I mean, Dave has this stupid idea that we should do land for peace, as if that hasn't been done before. We have
Pointed out it was offered a million times and they
And
rejected it.
as if peace is something
claims he
that is
claims
that
he
Israel needs
claims
to buy from these savages, like give us something or we'll kill you. That's not peace.
Yeah, that's extortion, and he also now in the vein of the new historians, I think likes to bring up the fact that, well, at every level the Israelis are sabotaging the negotiations by making impossible conditions for the Palestinians. He never goes into exactly what those are, but some of those impossible conditions, for example, for returning the West Bank, are strategic areas that Israel needs for its own defense, which amounts to about 6% of the land that they want to hold on to in order to maintain their own civil defense. And the Palestinians can't take it. Come on. Come on.
Um, Thank you, Wes, for the super chat. So another couple of things that Dave Smith says. One is I've read about blowback. I mean, I kind of stopped listening as soon as he said that, but we know about blowback. Basically, if the West uh, exists, then I don't think this is how the theorists of blowback would put it, but basically everything savages do to kill Westerners is somehow a response to the West existing and wanting to exist as civilized people, which is offensive to savages who would rather we were all savages. And James, I know you're
America
going to say something,
deserved
but I want to.
America deserved 9/11 because they have coercive taxation, Razi, don't you
Yeah,
know?
that was
And
yeah.
if that's what it takes, that's what these libertarians will argue.
Yeah, and
Here's
at some point, he brings up this thing that anti-Israel people love to do, which is say even Israelis, and then bring you some terrible Israeli who said something. So he gives former Prime Minister Ehud Barak, who was Prime Minister for a year and 8 months. The first time I voted, by the way, was to vote him out of office, which I was pretty proud of. And he said at some point, if I was an Arab at the right age, I would be a terrorist. And this is brought up by Dave Smith as some sort of justification. Yeah, Ehud Barak is a collectivist. He's pro-Israel because he was born there. Does that mean that that is the case for Israel? No, it means that Dave Smith does not have the case for the Palestinians, so he brings up the easiest straw man, supposedly pro-Israel side. By the way, Ehud Barak recently resurfaced by calling for civil disobedience until there's a ceasefire. So he is kind of a terrorist, even without being born on the
it's
other side.
ironic that a self-proclaimed individualist relies on Jewish people who say a certain thing to justify his point. He somehow, I guess, in his new history studies, doesn't realize that there's been Jewish opposition to a Jewish state from the very beginning. It's the Jews and Israel that is a very complex social milieu, not the Palestinians.
But yeah, whereas Palestinians, you see, how dare you, Mark, treat, even though there's near unanimity on the West Bank and Gaza against Israel, just forget that. You've got, they're all individuals and there's a spectrum of opinion. On the other hand, if I can quote one Jewish leader saying, well, from their perspective, I'd do it. No, give me the facts, Mr. Smith, as to why that would justify their murderous hatred of Jews, why they would want to kill babies, rape women, mutilate bodies on October 7th. How would that be justified? You're saying, sir, that there's actually a reasonable context for October 7th. Now, I want you, in fact, Mr. Smith, to explain to me how that would be a reasonable psychological position to take, ever. He couldn't. And so what you do is you cite a Jewish authority, and that's it. No, total argument from authority fallacy, total racist fallacy, in effect. He was being a racist and calling you a racist because you're treating the Palestinians like a, quote, collectivist. On the other hand, he could cite one Jewish leader, and that's it.
As an avatar for Jews. Yeah, it's pretty gross.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he did bring up a few times that he's a Jew. I don't know. It reminds me of Tim Watley, who converted to Judaism, but we all know he only converted for the jokes. That's a Seinfeld reference. People who don't get it, yeah, go after this show, watch some Seinfeld, and then
You're an
come back.
anti-dentite, Razi. I can
Rabid
tell.
anti-dentite. Best Monster says in the chat that Noam Chomsky compared 9/11 to Al-Shifa bombing. That I didn't hear that. That's not a surprise. Of course, you're talking about the Al-Shifa bombing where 500 people died until an hour later when it was discovered it was a misfired Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket that fell in the parking lot which for some reason had enough explosives that there was a big fire, and it turned out that a couple dozen people died. Yeah, that's not a surprise. Again, last I checked, Jeremy Corbyn's tweet about that bombing and 500 people dying was still up. So yeah, this is yeah. Daniel says, should I even read this? What Daniel says in the Zoom chat?
Yes, you should, please.
Whenever I hear, he says, whenever I hear Noam Chomsky, I'm surprised he's not dead. Well, we already have our title for the episode after he does pass away, which is Noam Chomsky meets 72 virgins. So yeah, well, that's our we have that template for such people. All right, Mark, we are coming to the end. I do want to say something else I disagreed with you, which we said at the end to Dave Smith. We're strange bedfellows in the liberty movement. And I heard that and I'm like, no, give me any run-of-the-mill Republican or Democrat over this anarchist, pro-Hamas, America is at fault for, countries hating us. Yeah, he's not an ally, and the fact that he's an anarchist, that's as far away from liberty as anybody can be, even if he claims to be pro-liberty and claims to revere Ayn Rand.
I agree with you. Let me make a confession. It was a political statement in an attempt to drive a wedge more in the liberty movement for objectivism, to try to influence more people in the liberty movement towards objectivism and away from anarchy. So it was more an attempt to keep doors open. So because doors can close in your face. The liberty movement is sick right now. It lacks ethical guidance. It knows not where it's going. I think objectivists have the answer. The libertarians don't know that, but I wanted to keep the door open in a way, and perhaps it's best shut. But some of these people have large followings, and I hope that it's possible to reach at least a fraction of those morons we call anarchists. Sorry, anarchists.
So I get that, but why not? And again, this is, I think, Monday morning quarterbacking in a sense, but why not say we're seemingly strange bedfellows in the liberty movement, but actually you don't belong in the liberty movement at all. You're not pro-liberty. You want another Islamic theocracy in the Middle East, and you want it to come about at the expense of the only country that, while not as rights respecting as the liberty movement would want, is the closest in the Middle East to anything rights respecting and the closest to achieving that goal. And the only place where you can imagine that ever happening in the Middle East at the moment, culturally.
Well, you know what? That is far better. And in the future, I think I'm going to steal that.
Well,
Yeah,
you're welcome to.
anyone who cannot distinguish America and Israel from Hamas and Iran is an enemy of liberty and not even an honorary member of the quote liberty movement, if the word liberty has any meaning to my way of thinking. On the other hand, I can understand why in that moment you're saying, hey, you say you guys believe in liberty. There is something to that. If you all say you're advocates of individual liberty, which is what you claim, and you claim to be the party of principle, etc., y'all don't know liberty from, a hole in the head. And maybe that's the better tactic, but I can understand wanting to keep that door open because what they're claiming, look, he could say, I revere Ayn Rand. Okay, he reveres Ayn Rand and then totally misrepresents her, does a straw man, and
Right.
you go objectivists are all collectivists.
He
Okay.
doesn't. But I did say that we did need to have these discussions because the liberty movement is its own worst enemy, and that's why and it was in the spirit of having these discussions more. Of course, that was not a discussion. It was mostly Dave filibustering and me responding to the filibuster in the best way that I could with a microphone that wasn't as powerful as his. So I kept getting electronically cut off as well. But Razi's point is the best point because it's the morally pure point. It's not even judging from what happened a couple of days ago. It's very clear to me that you can't have discussions with these people. Not like I didn't know that inside. I mean, I have wars with these guys online all the time, and they are uniquely immune to reason. So it may be the better part of wisdom to completely amputate that part of the liberty movement and disavow it completely and say it doesn't represent liberty at all. They certainly aren't in this case. It's glaringly apparent that they're going for the bad guys when they should be going for the state that actually
Yeah,
cares.
and again, to put any criticism I had in context, this is like me watching UFC, although I don't, and saying, no, he should have kicked him instead of punched him. And of course, knowing if I had gotten in the ring with this guy, in this case, I would have just probably sworn repeatedly, not even in like whole sentences, just words.
I want to say I know we have to go because I have to get ready to go to a no-gi class, but I did want to say that Razi said in advance, so we have some criticisms of you. Do you mind if we say this publicly or not? Which I appreciated that. I said, of course, say it publicly. I like it, just like when you do a role, when you're in the ring, you have to review what you've done in order to learn to be better. Because somebody's throwing stuff at you, especially this was my first time. Somebody's throwing stuff at you that you're not going to be familiar with. And most people who do debates do practice debates. The president doesn't just go up there and debate. He has several practice debates before he actually gets up there with the opponent that he's actually going to use, just like somebody has lots of sparring matches with somebody or rolls for hours and hours and hours with the idea of competition in mind. I didn't have that luxury here, but I have the luxury, the benefit, I should say, the gift of having gentlemen like you to be able to, after action, play by play, give me a critique that will make me better the next time. And I can't wait for the next time.
Well, for the next time, let's do that debate practice. I will gladly play the villain. Members of the Ayn Rand Center UK have seen, actually, Mark, you've seen me play the villain in a
You're great.
mock
You're
trial.
great. I'm
We'll do
telling you,
that.
you have an acting career. You're a fantastic villain.
Very
I
convincing
appreciate
as
that. And
villain.
yeah, that will be behind a paywall. So sign up for membership if you want to see that. Yeah, that's gonna actually that should happen, by the way, even if there's no debate coming up. That'll be fun in and of itself. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, James. Thanks everybody for watching. The Atlas Shrugged Book Club starts in a couple of minutes. We will be back tomorrow talking about Kamala Harris. That's going to be fun. And also before that, on the Daily Objective, talking about Columbia University. That's also going to be fun. Any last minute parting thoughts from either of you?
You kicked his ass, Mark. You kicked his ass, pure and
Thank you.
simple. And we may have little things here and there, but you clearly won.
I would just like to urge the people of Israel to adopt rational egoism as their philosophy moving forward. The world opinion be damned. The world opinion is wrong. You have jettisoned world opinion in the past and gone it on your own. You must this time. Your lives depend on it. And so please fight with vigor. And fighting with vigor means until Hamas is completely and totally annihilated and the Palestinian people renounce violence forever by surrendering. That's how we know they accept civilization again. Never forget it. Fight, fight, fight. Please. You are right now the vanguard of Western civilization. That's no shit. That's not an exaggeration. It's real. You can't fall.
Thanks, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Peace.